It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alex Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how are we feeling on this Tomlin Tuesday?
You know how good I'm feeling, Smitty? I'm just going to trigger Derek Bell right now. That's how good I'm feeling.
Oh, wow. You know what? I knew, for some reason, I knew a drink was coming in here. I thought it was going to be the mason jar because I know that some people always talk about the mason jars to you as well. But I appreciate
people do give me like some crap or some questions about the contents of my mason jar. And I went to Canes after practice today. Just felt like it was something that needed to happen. And it was tasty. It was good. Derek's wrong.
Shout out to Steelers DB. Actually, you know what? Let's just kick it off right there. We want your thoughts in the comments. Raising Canes, thumbs up, thumbs down. We need to know because Steelers Now crew split on Raising Canes.
I will admit that like mostly I like it as a delivery vehicle for the sauce. Like I'm not. It's just whatever you serve me with that sauce. I want. That's all. I don't really care what it is.
There we go. I appreciate that you said delivery vehicle. It's a drive. It's a Steelers Afternoon Drive for the
Steelers Afternoon Drive to Raising Canes. Hey, hit sponsorship. Let's go. Let's make this happen. Because you know how mad it would make Derek if we got Canes to sponsor the show?
I would have him on Fridays. He'd be the one reading.
I know. Sure. It would make him so mad. So we need to make that happen.
Jam-packed episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive coming your guys' way. We're obviously going to talk about the receiver news that dropped down today. We got to talk about the quarterback stuff. Definitely get into that later in the show as well. I want to start out talking about the injury, just a little bit of a rundown here. Tomlin Tuesday, as I mentioned, one of the first things that he's going to do, obviously, is address the injuries. Big news. We knew this was kind of coming. It was foreshadowed even like 10 days ago. This could be the week to get Alex Highsmith back. Certainly sounds like that's going to be the case for Sunday Night Football against the Jets. Certainly a welcome addition, especially when they also are going to be without Nick Herbig, already rolled out. So getting Highsmith back, obviously massive for this defense.
Yeah, and I think you kind of saw that coming when Ade Ogundeji was released yesterday. So, I mean, I think we kind of had a pretty good feeling. Highsmith himself said last week that he thought he was going to play this week. So, good that he's in there. Still, it looks like at least another week. We haven't really gotten any sense of the length of time that Nick Herbig may be out for, which is kind of troubling at this point. Have not really seen him around much since that hamstring injury against the Cowboys. Looks like he's still got at least another week. I would think that you're probably looking at after the bye for Nick Herbig at this point.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think people always have like a sense of optimism surrounding the injury when a player doesn't go on IR, but could that just be because like you only can do that 8 times? The Steelers have used that already, however many times, like they just don't want to do that, even if a guy is going to miss 4 weeks.
Well, it's twofold, right? It's like you want to use another IR spot, and what are you doing with the roster spot? Like, what do you need to do with it? And so I guess the Steelers got into a situation where Minka went down and Terrell Edmunds was playing free safety for a few plays, and in that moment you could have said, man, they really could have used another free safety here. Probably should have had Jalen Elliott on the 53-man roster and put Nick Herbig on the IR. So, I mean, maybe, but the 8 is a real thing. I mean, they've already used 2, and I would assume that they're going to want to try to use a couple more here directly to get some of these other guys back. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen there.
On the other side of that, Zach Frazier out week to week is how it was categorized. We kind of touched on that a little bit yesterday, but now hearing it from the horse's mouth with Mike Tomlin saying that. So not going to play Sunday night against the Jets. Do you have any insight into this in terms of how long you think he's going to miss? Or Ryan McCollum named the starter, by the way. We were kind of talking about that yesterday as well. Would it be, Spencer Anderson and McCormick? Would they have McCollum, who, obviously had to replace Frazier in this game, to continue to be the guys? What's your take on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's again like could play next week for Frazier. Certainly will play on the other side of the bye, I think is the way I would say this. And I think Ryan McCollum, as long as things don't go disastrously, will continue to play at center.
Okay. And then the others left the light on, could return this week. DeMonte KZ, Cordarrelle Patterson, MyCole Pruitt. I asked you about Pruitt because I thought I saw that he was practicing at least in a limited capacity because he had, prior to that, right, he hadn't done anything since he got hurt in that Broncos game.
Yeah, it was a pretty bad injury, some kind of knee sprain. But he looked pretty good last week. So I would say of those guys, I would say I have the most confidence in Pruitt being able to play this week. However, like, I don't think Rodney Williams has been awful. So, like, I don't know that they need to get Pruitt. Like, you can let him get healthy too. So, we'll see.
Probably changes. I mean, because Pruitt was playing quite a bit though, like comparatively to Rodney Williams, right? So, like, you just have to wonder if,
I mean, probably fewer snaps for Connor Hayward, and Darnell Washington snaps have been pretty elevated since Pruitt got hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Other things that we wanted to touch on, obviously, there's been a ton of wide receiver fallout happening today. The Davante Adams saga comes to an end with him landing with the New York Jets. We kind of all saw this coming. The writing was on the wall. I posted literally yesterday, as soon as the Jets' chances of winning that football game ended, with Aaron Rodgers targeting Mike Williams and Aaron even calling him out after the game, saying that he didn't get to the right spot on the ball. I said, okay, well, they're about to trade for Davante Adams. Lo and behold, not even 24 hours later, Davante Adams becomes a Jet. Mike Williams apparently on the trade block now, immediately following that. So, what's your take on all of that? Both Davante Adams going to the Jets, who we will see on Sunday night, and Mike Williams potentially becoming available after the Steelers tried to meet with him in the offseason, but never got out of New York. I shouldn't even say New York, out of New Jersey.
Florham Park is where the Jets are in New Jersey. I will say that Davante Adams going to the Jets was not really surprising. I never felt like the Steelers felt like they were that close to getting a deal done here for whatever reason. I look at the price tag, and I think it would be hard for me to see the Steelers beating that. A third-round pick that can become a second for the Raiders, who is probably going to be a pretty high third-round pick, not like the Steelers. Draft pick should be expected to be equivalent there. They would have had to go somehow higher, maybe a second, maybe a future second would have got it done. I don't know. I just there was no contract talk here. The Raiders didn't take any money. Davante Adams doesn't have a new deal before the trade. And so basically he is being acquired as a rental because, as we've said, no one is going to honor that $36.25 million a year going forward in 2025 and 2026. That is not guaranteed. So the Jets will have to work out a new deal with him if they want to keep him, or they can just cut him for no penalty at the end of this season. But it's basically a day 2 pick for an 11-game rental. Who's an expensive one, will still cost the Jets, I think, around $11 million for the rest of this year. I can understand why the Steelers passed on that deal. It doesn't sound like a great deal to me. However, it was probably the best receiver they had any chance of getting. And at some point, you think you have to make some deal, even if it's not the best one, right? I mean, I don't know. Can't like. I get, they're not a wide receiver away. I acknowledge that, but they're really holding themselves back with the lack of talent at the position. I just can't. Like, I don't think this was the right deal, but what happens if the right deal never comes?
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to seem like that's going to be the case because I have a hard time envisioning now, like, unless there's a name that's going to be out there that I'm just not thinking about right now. Like, the expected names that we are thinking about on the trade market just don't come to me. But again, I feel like we have this conversation every single time that we talk about receivers, whether it be somebody that we're missing out on in the trade market, or just when you see top to bottom what the construction of the Steelers wide receiver room looks like. And it just keeps pointing itself back to this spring. Like, I don't think the failure, and I put out a post today, and it was one of those ones where I was like, I read it back and I was like, wow, yep, hit the mark with this one. I said, again, I don't think the failure was missing out on Davante Adams today. The failure is feeling like we needed to land Davante Adams due to the construction of the wide receiver room going all the way back to March. And again, that doesn't mean not trading Deontay Johnson. It means not having a plan in place when you do trade Deontay Johnson that was better than just putting all your eggs in the Brandon Ayuk basket or all your eggs in the Davante Adams basket, which, by the way, I don't think that they were in the same realm. I don't think they were anywhere close with Davante Adams as they were with Brandon Ayuk. And you shared that sentiment already.
Yeah. So I totally agree. This is all problem going back to March. It was a misreading of the wide receiver market. They traded Deontay at low value and then had no ability to no urgency to replace him all offseason. There are plenty of guys they could have signed that would be perfectly fine for them. Guys that were available early in free agency.
Josh Reynolds got $4.5 million guaranteed for 2 years. 2 years, $9 million, but only 4.5 guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of guys out there that I think would have been really good fits for the Steelers that they could have afforded. That I just don't understand. Curtis Samuel was like 324 at Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a perfect fit for this offense. They love their Ohio State Buckeyes. Like, that should have been a guy that they should have been racing to, and they just never even seemed interested. And so
those are literally the two. Somebody asked me what I would have done in free agency. Not both, but at least one of those guys is what I said I would have done if it was up to me. Yeah,
I mean, to me, like, and it didn't. And I understand we're talking about hindsight here, but it didn't seem to make sense when it was happening either. And so even guys that I don't think are like doing that well, like Gabe Davis, I think would be so much better than what the Steelers have right now.
I think for this offense, especially because he can block too. Like I think at the very least,
deep. What else does Arthur Smith do? Like that's it. That's the whole list. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Mike Williams, I think, is a good fit also. He kind of fits in that same mold, to be perfectly honest, where he's a bigger guy. He can block. He will go deep. Doesn't do a whole lot else. He's not the same player he used to be. I think that's pretty clear coming off an ACL last year. Doesn't seem to have a whole ton of burst to him right now. Just 10 catches through 6 games for the Jets. But I think he could be had for little to nothing, and I think he's probably still an upgrade on Van Jefferson. I may be more interested in Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who was cut by the Buffalo Bills after they traded for
wide receiver
Amari
fallout,
Cooper, who we knew was not coming to Pittsburgh because the Browns would rather drown him in the Cuyahoga River than let him come to Pittsburgh. But interesting that he goes there, and then that opens up another potential receiver for the Steelers. MVS is someone who was available all summer. Another one of these guys that was just sort of out there that the Steelers could have had at any point and just didn't seem to have any interest in making even the smallest upgrade to their receiver room. I think he would be that, although hasn't really shown it with 6 games with the Bills. He's been targeted only 9 times.
I mean, you want to talk about a guy just saying, hey, just run deep. I mean, MVS is going to do that. Like, I think that he's at the very least a field stretcher. When we got, because he was signed late too. Like when we got into like the second, third phases of free agency, there was probably a point where he was like the best wide receiver left on the market for the Steelers. And then he went by the wayside as well, but now back available on the market. Again, these aren't needle movers. I'm not like pounding the table for any of these guys necessarily. But if you're looking at this team right now, looking for a way that you can upgrade and at least bring something to the table, both of those guys do in different ways. We just mentioned that MVS can stretch the field, obviously. Mike Williams can still do a little bit of that, but he's a bigger body guy and he can block, which again has been my biggest thing is if we're going to have guys that aren't contributing in the receiving game, please at least give me something to like spring this run game on the perimeter because we just don't have guys that can block right now at the position either.
Yeah, I think the blocking is a big reason why you've seen George Pickens' snaps go down. I do think there are other guys that are going to be available. And again, we still have 3 weeks till the trade deadline. So, I understand these moves are happening today, but I would expect more of them to happen close to that deadline than right now. The league voted on the Steelers' proposal to move it back a week for a reason that general managers wanted to get farther into the season so more teams can be eliminated. There'd be more trades, more availability of players. And so I think teams are probably going to wait until the end for most of these guys. And I think guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Darius Slayton are probably going to be available. Maybe
I think Slayton's the one for me now, to be honest, that I'm hoping for.
Maybe, and again, this depends on how the games go between now and then. Like you need the Steelers need some teams to kind of fall out of contention, and maybe a way that they're not so far. But a team like the Seahawks, sitting at 3-3, they haven't been great. Maybe Tyler Lockett becomes available. DK Metcalf's been frustrated. I don't think they want to trade DK. I think they want to find ways to make him a bigger part of their offense. And Tyler Lockett seems to be the guy that can go there. Carolina, the Steelers can't trade for Deontay Johnson, but maybe someone like Adam Thielen could get healthy and would be a potential option. Kendrick Bourne in New England is someone that we've talked about, like working his way back from injury. If he goes out there and has a big game, then suddenly I think he becomes a legitimate target. Right now, I think probably fair to stay skeptical, and we'll see what happens with the Broncos. They're 3-3, but I've said all along they should be trading Cortland Sutton. I don't know. They seem like they're not, but I think they should. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they could have traded him for a third prior to the season. I get that you're trying to develop Bo Nix or whatever, and that's why you kept him around. But if you end up trading him at the deadline for far less value, I don't think that that's going to be a great look.
Yeah, it's not. But I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand much about what the Broncos have done this offseason. So.
Kendrick Bourne's interesting because I know that he's coming off the injury this year. He only has 3 catches for 15 yards. I'm curious to see, though, does he start picking up with Drake May now playing quarterback, who's pretty good in his NFL debut? And if that's the case, certainly somebody that I'd be interested in. I liked him going back to San Francisco days. And again, looking at like just traits that they can bring to the offense, somebody that at least in the past has been somebody that can stretch the field. So, that's interesting. People have thrown out Christian Kirk. The thing with him is like the contract, and that's another, like he plays primarily in the slot. So what are we doing? Just continuing to get guys that don't play on the outside, but also the contract that he carries as well. I think he has an out somewhere in there, but I'm not sure the specifics of it.
Christian Kirk is owed a lot of money at a $14.5 million base salary this year and next year. Also has a pretty big signing bonus. So a trade would murder Jacksonville's salary cap.
The potential out? Did that happen already? Was it prior to this season?
So when you look at those, like if you're looking at like Spotrac or whatever, and you says like potential out, that's not anything. That's just like them guessing where a team might want to cut a player. Like there's not any language in a contract that like gives a team a specific time window to get out of it. It's just
okay. See, I thought it was based off where guaranteed money. Like I thought that's what they were basing it off of.
Yeah, I mean, so they'd have a 20. I mean, they'd have 22 million in dead cap hit between this year and next year if they traded him right now. And the Steelers would still owe him, I'm not going to do the math in my head, but more than 10 million for the rest of this year. And then there'd be a $15.5 million salary next year that I don't believe would be guaranteed. But I mean, I think that's, from a Jacksonville perspective, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow. I don't even know if they could. Do they even have $22 million in cap space? Probably not.
I have no idea. It's not like he's like bad. Like I know that the team is, but are you swallowing that money just because you're bad? Like I don't know. So
yeah, they have 14. They might be able to make it work.
But anyway, I don't know that it's from like a fit what we're looking for. It's necessarily the best route to go anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I've never been hugely impressed with Christian Kirk as a player. He was sort of the avatar for like why, like what is going on with this wrong wide receiver market that like middle tier guys like this that are not stars are getting paid like this. So I mean, he's an upgrade over what they have in many ways, but I don't think he's worth what he's being paid. So I think there's not a lot of trade value there for me.
Speaking of wide receivers, I want to talk about one that is currently in-house in George Pickens. Tomlin, I know that the quarterback stuff kind of overshadowed everything, and we're going to be able to tie that in as well, but was kind of asked about George Pickens and his production, the way that he's played lately. What did you make of his remarks regarding George?
Yeah, so I asked Mike about George, and, I thought that when I looked at the game, I thought that George Pickens gave a better effort and a worse performance. That he looked like he was trying, but the results were not necessarily there. Dropped a couple passes that I think he usually catches. His routes weren't necessarily the most crisp and clean that we've seen him. And so I asked him about Pickens, and I got an interesting answer. I'll read it for you guys. I thought he did some good things in the game. I thought we left some things out there, but leaving things out there is generally a collective issue and not an individual one. And I think that can describe receiver production all the time. He went on to talk about, because for a receiver to have production, the line has to protect, the quarterback has to find him, and also defenses have the ability to try to take a guy away, which is outside of the receiver's control. And okay, maybe he just doesn't want to criticize George Pickens for dropping a couple passes that I think he should have caught. But I don't know. To me, that answer came off as oddly critical of Justin Fields, right? You can't. I understand not wanting to criticize your player, but you almost have to pick one, right? You can say it's a collective failure, but if the question is about George Pickens, if the answer is it's a collective failure, then the subtext is that means it's on the other parts of the operation, right? Or am I reading too much into this?
I don't think so. I get, the thing that I guess we'll never know is if there is for sure a meaning behind it other than just Tomlin's words, or exactly what he's trying to convey. He has a way of saying a lot of things typically without really saying anything, and maybe this is another just one of those cases. But he's been critical of players in the past. I mean, do you feel like he has to take a more sensitive approach because of knowing how fiery George is?
George last week, a little bit.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, not.
Yeah.
And the question was more about seeing improvement. And so I think, I don't know, curious to me. There was a lot that was stated that was curious about the quarterback position on the South Side this afternoon.
Okay, well, let's talk about that right now then, because it really seems like this is the week where it's going to be a true decision. Up to this point, Russ has either not been available or was still kind of working his way back. Finally saw him as the number 2 last week, but this is the week where it really seems like, okay, now a decision has to be made who is QB1 going forward. Russell Wilson still listed on the depth chart as QB1. It was put out there in a tweet by, I think it was Tom Pelissero, that kind of people were taking and running as for sure it was going to be Russ as the starter because Tomlin said he was going to get QB1 reps. What do we make of all this information, Alan, and what are you expecting to see when the team does practice tomorrow?
Yeah, it was very interesting that the report from NFL Network comes out right at noon, right when Tomlin's supposed to talk. And then Tomlin didn't say what the report said. I don't know. Was that just very coincidentally timed? Generally, the way that works is if you've got a scoop and someone says, "Hey, just hold it till right before we announce it. You can have it first, though." Usually, then exactly what is reported is what was said. So I don't know what to think of that. I think mostly that Mike Tomlin enjoys playing games with his own team and with other teams. He enjoys competition, and it probably does him no good to announce who his quarterback is on a Tuesday when he can make them work for it all week, and he can make the Jets think they need to prepare for both players all week, and then announce his decision Friday afternoon. I was expecting that all along. I was not necessarily expecting it to be Russell Wilson at the end. I got to be honest. I thought that 32 points and a win on the road would be enough to sway Mike Tomlin into keeping Justin Fields a quarterback. I appreciate his sudden and somewhat out of character, process over results methodology that we have not necessarily seen over the years. I approve of that. If you think Russell Wilson is the better player, it does not matter that Justin Fields just won this last game. And I made an example in the story I wrote at the site is no one is wondering whether Jeremiah Moon is keeping the starting outside linebacker job when Alex Highsmith comes back just because the Steelers won, right? If it's clear, it doesn't matter. And so I don't know. To me, Tomlin's trying to walk this line again where it doesn't seem like it's clear. If it was clear, there wouldn't be a conversation about it. If it was clear, you wouldn't be obfuscating who you would just say, no, Russ is our starter. And when he's healthy, he's going to start. He never once said that. So it's not clear to him. It's clearly muddled, and I don't really know where we're going with this. The idea that they could play both of them, to me, is actually kind of interesting. I understand that no one has ever had any success with that, certainly not the NFL level, but I think you really lose something if you take Justin Fields' wheels out of the equation, especially in the red zone. I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. To me, the answer based on his past was that he was going to stick with Justin Fields, but have a very short leash.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's a real chance that Russell Wilson could start. I'm curious to see how this is going to go.
I was going to say, you kind of mentioned it with like the whole Jeremiah Moon thing, but I just want him to come out and say everybody, like, we're not naming a starter at any position. Like TJ Watt might start. Minka Fitzpatrick, he might start, but we don't know. We got to get to Sunday.
I mean, in some ways, that's true. Like, it's certainly true at the beginning of training camp. Like, now it's not really. Like, I don't know. It's just it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Yeah, anybody can lose their starting job if they play poorly enough. Like, it's the NFL. Results matter. We see people get benched all the time. But man,
as far as the utilization of both, I mean, depending on the way people are taking that, I agree that there's a way that it could work. I think of, the Saints in the way that they use Taysom Hill in certain packages as a quarterback, because Justin will still be able to throw in certain situations. I think that you should have the ability to throw out of them as well. He's still a threat to do so, but also like he would be the quarterback that I'm using, like you're saying, whether it be, 10 yards and in around the goal line, short yardage situations, QB sneak, like you're going to have Russ do that. So I still think to some degree, Justin Fields is still going to be involved. As we sit here predictively, though, I'll put it on the record. I think it's going to end up being Russell Wilson as a starting quarterback.
I think so too. Do you think that's the right decision?
No. And it's not necessarily. We've had this conversation. I think Russell Wilson is the better passer. I don't think that there's a question about that. I think that there's the opportunity. I think Justin has left some plays on tape in that regard. I think due to the structure specifically with this offense, though, with the pieces that are at the disposal, the offensive line and the weapons that are there, I don't know that Russell Wilson moves the needle enough for me with his arm to lose Justin's legs.
Yeah, unless they're trying to find a way to split that difference and like keep Justin around a whole bunch. I think starting Russ is not wrong, but I'm not sure it's going to be better. Like, I just think you're going to take away from one area and add to another. I don't know that the end result is going to be better. I do think it's an interesting choice from Tomlin. The Steelers have kind of been giving mixed messages about how focused on like their end goal they are versus, making decisions about the future. I know Tomlin does not care about next year at all. You can, if your thoughts are, what about next year? It doesn't matter. What about the draft pick? It doesn't matter. The only thing Mike Tomlin is basing this decision on is who's going to score the most points from the rest of the season. If he had a crystal ball and he knew that Russell Wilson would score 801 points the rest of the season and Justin Fields would score 800, he'd start Russell Wilson. No, like that's how little he cares about that draft pick in the future. But I just think the reason to reject what Justin Fields has done so far would be to say it's going to be really hard to go beat some good teams in the playoffs with 145 yards passing. That you're going to need to have a way to compete with good offenses, that your defense is not going to be able to. I mean, the 4 wins, yes, the Steelers are 4-2. The 4 wins, defense held the other team under 14 points. Like, you're not going to go into Buffalo.
Isn't it 8 points per game in their wins?
Something like that. Yeah, 14.3 overall. You're not going to go into Buffalo or Kansas City and hold them to 14 points in the playoffs. You're going to need your offense to do more. And so I do think this really does show that, like, this is some, like, hot seat coaching from Mike Tomlin that I don't think we've really seen. Like, if you have a big picture focus, Justin Fields is probably the right answer here. But I can see Russell Wilson being a better quarterback for the Steelers come January because of his experience and just the upside potential in the passing game. I don't know. I've said all along I think Wilson would be the better player. I think the timing of this is interesting.
Mm-hmm. If they genuinely believe that it's the passing game that needs to be unlocked, though, I really question. It takes me back to the receiver thing. Like I understand that there are plays.
How much unlocking is there able to be done?
Right.
And not just the receivers, the pass protection has not been great either. And like, I can say that there's lots of guys open. In fact, I was having a laugh in the press room. Dan Orlovsky did a video for ESPN about like, oh, Justin Fields' hidden yardage, right? Where he's like turning what would be a sack into a gain, right? Either by using his legs or extending a play and then finding a guy. And he highlights one play and he's like, Justin Fields, there's nobody to throw to. And here's an open rusher. And I'm like, Connor Hayward is on the D in Raiders in the end zone. And there is one defender on the R and one defender on the other R. There's like 20 yards of uncovered. Like, just throw the ball, man. And like, I think there's a lot out there that can be done with the receivers they have in the passing game that is not being done. How good can it be? I think is an interesting unanswered question. You know, I think that's really what this comes down to me, is how much better can the Steelers' offensive passing game be within the limitations of the guys they have right now? Because you know you're giving up a good bit in the quarterback run game and the quarterback mobility by making this change. How much upside is there really? I see a lot of open guys on tape. So, like, I'm not going to say that it's not possible to win that exchange. It just feels risky to me, and riskier than I think Mike Tomlin usually operates.
And you go back to the timing going against the Jets and Giants. And I know that the Giants as a whole, you might not look at them and see like a super formidable opponent. I mean, that defense has been very good. And especially that defensive front getting after quarterbacks this year, much improved. Dexter Lawrence,
Dexter Lawrence v. Ryan McCollum or an injured Zach Frazier does not sound like a winning recipe for the Steelers.
With Russell Wilson behind it. Like, that's what I'm saying. So the timing of it just seems weird to me. If you are planning on doing this, I guess the longer you go, the more questions that you raise if you do make the switch. Like if they were to just kind of ride it out till the bye and then throw Russ in there as the starter, you know, what if they win the next two games and Justin looks really good? Then, you know, is that even harder to sell if this is what you planned on doing? So I don't know. I love the conversation though, to be honest with you. No matter which side of the coin people are on, to be honest with you, I feel almost weird not having a super one-sided take towards either of these two guys, because I think Justin's been fine. I think they could continue to roll with Justin and be okay. But I don't think he's been so good where it warrants some, you know, it's like this big catastrophe if they do make the switch.
I think the big selling point of Justin has been for a lot of people that he could potentially become this like quarterback of the future. And I think it should be pretty clear after 6 weeks that that's not happening. They're like, you're not.
I actually think he's gone in the wrong direction.
I agree. 100%. 100% agree. I
was very hopeful that the home opener after the Chargers, I was like, oh my, like, is this what we're going to continue to see? The arrow is pointing up right now. I think since that point, he also very good in the second half versus Indianapolis. The context has to be added there, though. The situation of the football game, the defenses Indy was throwing at him at that juncture and everything like that. But still, he was very good. But then since then, these last two games have been awful for him as a passer. So the arrow is kind of going back in the other direction now.
Yeah. I just think the idea that he's going to become a player that he's never been at the NFL level in 3 years was always pretty far-fetched. I think the Steelers have done a very good job to maximize what they're getting out of him. But I think, like, a lot of people want it to be Fields just because they only care about the future, not even thinking about 2024. And I think you got to get rid of that opinion, because I think neither of these guys is probably a very good option beyond this year. So pick the one you think is.
And that's kind of, this is when we first got both these guys and they were only here for 1 year. We said how intriguing it was going to be and how interested we were to see it play out because of that reasoning. And we both said, like, chances are it's better chance of it being neither than one of them. And that's, you know, kind of the path that we're going down. Man, I really loved this conversation today. There's episodes, Al and I talk about it sometimes once we're done recording, where I'm just like, I'm like super juiced about the way the episode came out and just the conversation we had. And I'm excited to get it to you guys. This is one of those ones. So,
you know how good you feel about this episode? As good as Chris Boswell hit a kickoff against the Raiders. And he hit it so good, he didn't even look to see. He just turned around and went and got the tee. Like, that's how good it was. Like, I got all of that one. And it just turned around and picked the tee up, started to walk off the field. Not paying any attention to the return whatsoever. Didn't even wait for it to land. It was just like, yep, that'll do. I'm going to go get the tee now.
Completely missed that one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, they don't show the kicker on kickoffs anymore because the camera's all
Yeah,
down.
right.
Everybody's down there. The kicker's not on the screen. So I thought that was really funny. Like a golfer who just knows he pured it, right? Just bend over and pick up the tee. And
Chris big time golfer. So
yeah,
he's
big golfer. So yeah. I just thought it was really funny that he just he's like, yep, got all that one. All right, I'm out of here.
Love it.
That's how we feel walking off this show right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we do so, Alan, you know the drill. Tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the word so I can get paid. Promo code Allen10, 10% off an annual subscription. Costs $4 a month. DB has a huge article breaking down Mike Tomlin's risk of going with Russell Wilson, why it might work and why it not. I highly recommend you go check that out. And then like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. That's free. And all you do is you just get reminded every time there's a new piece of awesome content from me, Smitty, DB, the whole gang here at Steelers Now. Do that.
If for whatever reason you do not want to look at us while you are consuming the content, you can also find us on all the audio
for whatever
platforms.
Reason. Whatever reason that might be. Anything
Apple,
at all.
Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, you can find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive and you will find us, just like you'll find us on TikTok, also at Steelers Afternoon Drive. Then you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.